It started with a shortcut, a two-lane road cutting through miles of dense forest, barely used except by locals. It had no name, no road signs, just a cracked stretch of asphalt winding through the trees. People took it because it saved time, but every now and then, someone who took that road never made it to the other side. The town had its stories. A teenager who went missing after taking the road home from a party. A truck driver whose rig was found abandoned in the middle of the lane, engine still running. A couple on a road trip who called a friend, saying they were almost there, only to never show up. No wreckage, no bodies, just gone. But none of that stopped Daniel. He was a delivery driver, worked nights, and didn't believe in ghost stories. People disappear all the time, he told my friend Jason once. They probably just ran away, or someone took them. Has nothing to do with the damn road. So when a late delivery meant choosing between an extra 40-minute drive or cutting through that nameless road, Daniel didn't hesitate. 10:43 p.m., he turned onto the shortcut. The road was pitch black, no street lights, only his high beams slicing through the thick fog rolling between the trees. The deeper he drove, the more unnatural the silence felt. No crickets, no wind, just the hum of his tires on cracked pavement. Then came the fog, thicker, heavier, almost alive. His GPS flickered, the map freezing, then vanishing altogether. 10:50 p.m., headlights in the rearview mirror. At first he was relieved. Someone else was on the road, but something was wrong. The car behind him had no driver, no one in the seat, just a pair of headlights keeping perfect pace with him. He blinked. Was he seeing things? He pressed the gas, 60 miles per hour. The headlights followed, 70 miles per hour. Still there, 80. They didn't fall back. His hands tightened on the wheel, heart pounding. The road ahead was endless. The fog swallowed the trees, the pavement, the sky itself. It was just him and those lights, chasing him through the dark. Then, the radio turned on. A woman's voice, faint and static-filled. "You should have turned back!" He hadn't touched the radio. The voice came again, louder, more urgent. "You should have turned back!" The headlights behind him vanished, and then, bang! Something slammed into his car, sending it skidding sideways. He fought for control, but the tires had no grip. The world spun, trees, fog, darkness, and then silence. 10:59 p.m. The dash clock stopped moving. Daniel sat there, gripping the wheel, breath shaking. His headlights barely cut through the fog. The road was empty. No wreckage, no sign of whatever had hit him. Then he saw it. Up ahead, a figure stood in the middle of the road. It was tall, too tall, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its head tilted at an odd angle. No eyes, no face. Just a black shifting void where a face should be. Daniel's stomach turned ice cold. It raised a hand and pointed. Behind him. Daniel turned, heart hammering, and his own reflection stared back at him from the rearview mirror. But it wasn't him. The thing in the mirror was smiling. 11 p.m. Daniel's truck was found the next morning. Engine still running. Driver's door open. Headlights on. No sign of Daniel. His phone was in the seat. Last call made at 10:59 p.m. But it never went through. The road was searched for miles. No footprints, no tire marks, no blood. He was just gone. They say sometimes on foggy nights, drivers on that road see headlights behind them, following, always at the same speed. And if you look in your mirror at exactly 10:59 p.m., you might see someone staring back. and it won't be you. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everybody knows everybody, and stories, real or not, get passed down like family heirlooms. Some of them are just tales meant to scare kids into behaving, but others, well, some of them stick with you. There's one story that everybody around here has heard at least once. It happened years ago, long before I was born. But my uncle swears it's true. It's about a man who walked into the fog and never came back. No one really remembers his name anymore. Maybe because no one wants to, but people remember him. A quiet guy, lived alone, worked an early shift at the mill, and had a habit of taking the same walk every night. It was just part of his routine. Leave the house around 10 p.m., walk the same path down Main Street, past the old church, cut through the empty field near the river, and then loop back home. Nothing unusual about it. Small town, quiet streets. He'd done it hundreds of times before, but the night he disappeared, the fog was different. Now we get fog here all the time. The town's close to the river, and when the seasons change, the mist rolls in thick, swallowing up the streets. But this fog, this wasn't like that. People still remember how fast it came in. One minute the sky was clear, cold but calm, and the next, the entire town was buried in dense, suffocating mist. It wasn't gradual either. It was sudden, unnatural. Like someone had flipped a switch, and that was the night he went missing. The last person to see him was old Mrs. Patterson, who lived near the edge of town. She was sitting by her window, sipping her tea like she always did when she saw him walking past. She had seen him dozens of times before, always the same routine, always at the same time, but this time something was different. She said he wasn't alone. At first, she thought maybe someone else was out for a walk, but as she watched, she started to feel uneasy. The person behind him wasn't walking like a normal person. They weren't speeding up, weren't falling behind, just following, keeping the exact same distance. And then, just as he stepped into the thickest part of the fog, he stopped. Not like he was checking his phone, not like he was tying his shoe. He just froze. Mrs. Patterson swears she blinked, and when she opened her eyes, he was gone. Just like that. At first, nobody panicked. People figured he had gotten lost in the fog, maybe wandered a little too far. But then morning came and he never showed up for work. His house was exactly as he left it. Lights still on, dinner half-eaten on the table, jacket still hanging by the door. It was like he had stepped out for a minute and planned to come right back. Search parties went out. They checked the fields, the riverbanks, even the old abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. Nothing. No footprints, no dropped keys, no signs of a struggle, just gone. And then the fog came back, thicker than before, heavier, like it was waiting for something. And that's when the sounds started. People reported hearing whispers in the streets late at night, faint voices calling from deep within the fog. Some claimed to hear their own names spoken, low and breathy just behind them. But whenever they turned around, nothing. Others started hearing footsteps. Slow, deliberate, always just a few steps behind. One man swore he could feel someone breathing right against his neck. But when he turned around, all he saw was the empty road, swallowed in mist. And then there was the knocking. Just after midnight, all over town, people would hear 3 slow knocks on their doors and windows. But
but whenever they checked, no one was there. The town tried to ignore it. People locked their doors, shut their windows, told themselves it was just the wind, but everyone knew better. And then came the worst part. One night, a woman was walking home late when she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, steady, matching her pace, step for step. She didn't turn around at first. She didn't want to. But as she got closer to her house, the air got colder. The fog seemed to press in tighter. And then she heard it. Breathing right behind her. Not normal breathing. Slow, raspy, like someone who hadn't breathed in a very, very long time. She couldn't take it anymore. She turned around, and there was nothing, just fog. But as she stood there, frozen, she swears she saw a shadow, just barely visible through the mist. A human shape standing perfectly still, watching. She ran inside, locked the doors, and never walked home alone again. People don't walk alone at night anymore, not when it's foggy, not after what happened. Because they say if you're out there alone, you might hear footsteps behind you. You might feel someone watching. And if you turn around, you might see a shape, just barely visible through the mist. And if you do, don't stop walking, because no one knows where he went that night. But some people think
he's still looking for someone to take with him.